welcome in our good friend, Billy Osborne. He's going to join us every Wednesday on the show. Ozzy, how you been, pal?
I'm good, Rich. How about yourself, buddy?
I'm doing real well. Did you watch the All-Star game last night? Did you flick through it? Did you hang in there for a couple innings?
No, I did. I watched it, and it was interesting. You know, it went from this pitcher's duel.
Right.
I thought it was pretty cool how they mic'd up some of the players, and I liked that when they were talking to Harper, and then Trout went deep. I thought that was pretty cool TV. And I'm a sports junkie. I even watched the celebrity softball game the night before, and thought it was pretty funny when Jamie Foxx was mic'd up and Shaq was out there, and so that was good. I thought that was fun, but yeah, I thought the All-Star game. I know obviously people on the East Coast, it ended a little late, but
right.
Probably one of the better ones.
What I don't know if you read or you heard Commissioner Manfred's comments on Trout. Talked about it a little bit about a half an hour ago about the marketability of the sport and how, in so many words, he can be such a there's can be ton more exposure with him if he actually put in the time to give a little more or to market himself a little more, which I kind of wholeheartedly disagree. I mean, listen, they're not a good team. They haven't been a playoff team. They play on the West Coast. He's a generational player, and I don't have a problem with him just going about his business and just being a great player and enjoying hunting and fishing and watching the Eagles play in the fall. I kind of thought the comments were a little lowbrow by the commissioner.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like, was he deflecting a little bit? I mean,
I think he was because of the sport. I think he was.
And if you look about it, and Rich, what I think is, and you and I were talking about this too. Just one of our friendly conversations off the air. It's like, when was the last time we were talking about the NBA and the summer leagues and things like that? And it's interesting how the NBA. I couldn't stand the NBA, and I never watched it. And I never really cared about it. And for whatever reason, well, I shouldn't say whatever reason, they've done a really good job of marketing their stars and marketing the game, and it's become very, very popular. Whereas baseball, is not. And I think that, with Mike Trout, he is, let's face it, he's an unbelievable talent. You make a good point. The team's not very good. He's on the West Coast. It's tough to, and plus, you got to be yourself. You can't force a guy to be something he's not. And keep in mind, this too, Rich. So, like in football, Larry Fitzgerald, right,
yep.
and Barry Sanders, they
yep.
get the ball,
yep.
they score the touchdown,
yep.
and what do?
They give it to the official. Yep.
Right, and who loves that? All the fathers, all the old timers, all the coaches, all the guys that really love football. They're like, that's the way I want my son to be. That's the way I love my team to be, right? But what gets on SportsCenter? The guy who does the backflip, the orchestrated dance in the end zone. When you hit a home run, if you do the bat flip or if you watch it and get, Mike Trout, if he hit a home run and he was like, yeah, man, that's me, look at me, and pointed to the dugout and then pointed to the pitcher, next time he comes up, he's going to have a 98-mile-an-hour fastball right at his head.
Right.
So it's a little different in baseball than it is in football and basketball, and I think part of that, is why the game doesn't have maybe some of that marketability that some of the other sports do.
You look at the Phillies second half of the season. Look, we knew there were going to be about 10 teams out there really making a pitch and a play for Manny Machado. I ultimately thought it was going to be the Dodgers, maybe the Brewers as a dark horse. But here's the thing that I reminded the audience. Even if you don't get them, you still got an opportunity to spend in the offseason and get them, because at the end of the day, and you could attest to this, and I've been trying to sell the audience on this, you played at a high level, at the highest levels. At the end of the day, when you're a player like Machado, it doesn't matter where you go. It matters on what team can outbid the next team to try to get your services once you hit the market. It's all about money.
It is, and that's you want to really break down baseball? I think that's the problem. I think it starts at the top, and it starts at their structure. When you start the baseball season, because of the way the playoff format is, and because of the way the salary cap is, there's probably about 7 or 8 teams, that realistically are in the hunt every year. And why is that? Because they have the best farm system? No. Is it because they have the best coaches? No. It's because of just what you said. It's who's going to outspend the other and who has the cash. And unfortunately, in baseball, you are the haves and the have-nots. And now every once in a while, you'll have some outliers. But let's face it, if you want to go after those, that's and then your team, like the Phillies, there's no really stars per se that they went out and bought. Most of it is either through a trade or from their own farm system. Whereas you look at the Yankees and the Angels and the Dodgers and the Red Sox, and there's 5 or 6 teams that just outspend everybody. And I think baseball becomes boring to all the other teams because by July, 90% of the teams are out of the playoff hunt. Whereas in football, most of the teams are in it until the last 2 weeks, and that's just that's the difference. So the interest level, I think, rises.
And a different caveat too for the people that always believe, and I hear what you're saying with a team like the Yankees, but even over the last several years with the Anduhars, the Torres, the Judges, the Sanchez, the Fraziers, those are you are talking homegrown players, so to speak. But you're right. I mean, to a lesser extent, or I should say to a greater extent, the sport itself, it is somewhat saturated because really when you think about it, there's 3 teams in the AL. You got Boston, you have Houston, you have the Yankees, you want to throw in Seattle. And then in the NL, it's somewhat wide open. Now, with that being said, I still think even though the Phillies, it does look like they've missed out on Machado as the Dodgers are reportedly on the verge of acquiring Manny Machado, I still think they can go out and maybe get another bat. They can maybe go and make a move for Beltre. They can maybe make a move for another lefty or bring in a guy like Britton or Hand or J.A. Happ. I don't think the Philly fans should be as upset today if they weren't able to make the move for Machado because Middleton's already come out and said, we're going to try to spend. So in the offseason, again, it's basically highest bidder.
Well, it is, and I think that why the Philly fans are a little bit upset, or maybe a little bit sad, however you want to say it, or maybe mad, is that they're in the hunt, so to speak. And I think that when they went and you look at teams that are in the playoff hunt, it seems a lot of times the teams that do a good job of adding players at the break or before the deadline are the teams that sometimes get that push that's needed. In that back half of the season or in September when the races are really tightening up.
Right.
And the Phillies need a bat. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they need a lot of things, but Machado obviously could have been a great addition to the Phillies for their playoff push this year. So, but you're right. In the offseason, they're building for the future, and I think that they're still in great shape from a money perspective. There's no doubt about that.
Again, a couple minutes past 1 o'clock hour on a Wednesday, middays with Q. Rich Quinones here. Billy Osborne joining us on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline. Ozzy's going to join us every Wednesday or so. Can't wait for football season, by the way. I was trying to talk a lot of other Philly fans in general off the ledge as well because you also miss out on Leonard. But even with that said, you have an opportunity to make a play for him. And again, it looks like he's going to get traded to Toronto. I find it ironic, too, though. Like, I think Toronto actually saved the Philadelphia 76ers here from making a mistake because I think he's a talented player when healthy, but to me, he just reeks of a malcontent. And I don't know if you agree with this. I still think the Sixers are a very young and impressionable team, and the last thing you want to do is kind of disrupt that chemistry.
I think your point is I think it's a great one. And I looked at this from so many different ways. I had no idea what you were going to say. We talked about this like they do on some of those morning shows. You take this position, I'll take this position. No, I didn't have here.
Yeah, no, we don't do that. No, we just free talk, free reign. We'll see if we can punch Ozzy back up because I know he was going to make a very good point on Leonard. So we apologize for the connection, but I want to get his points on Leonard. No, I never. I don't do the pre-prepping stuff. We don't do that. We'll punch him back up. We'll see if we can punch him back up. But while I have a minute, going back to the Leonard conversation, listen, he's going to help any team. We know that. But you're going to try to tell me if a player like Leonard can't get along with that Spurs organization or thinks he was wrong, and he can't get along with a guy like Pop, who is tough to deal with, but they are the model of consistency. You think now you come to a Sixers team, and oh, by the way, they don't even have a GM in place. That's another thing. They don't have a GM in place yet. So this is why everyone has to be careful with well, hold on a second. It's all about the connections and Brown with San Antonio and it doesn't matter. All of that's a moot point. It really is. And you look at everything that happened with Popovich this year and all the injuries and losing some players. And again, like I said, it wasn't one of those seasons. And it happens sometimes. It happens. You got the injury, miscommunication, potential misdiagnosis, ill feelings, and everything. So it was a bad fit for him in San Antonio. But go ahead, Ozzy. Got you back up. We punched up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Your point on Leonard.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but my feeling with this is right. He was going to be a one-year guy, and I don't care what anybody said. Yes, there's always a potential. What happened in Oakland, or what happened with OKC, and Paul George, he stayed, and that's great. But that doesn't mean this guy's different. He wanted to go to LA. That's been the plan all along. He's made it very well known. And he comes in here, like, he's already made it known that he's not happy going to Toronto. Now, if he doesn't go, he misses out on $20 million, and he's going to give that up. But he would have came to the Sixers, and you're right. We talked about this. Their chemistry is so good. Why they are so good is because they're unselfish. They love the share the basketball. And would he have been a fit from a basketball standpoint? There's no doubt. His position is probably what would have got them, no doubt, over the Boston hump and definitely Toronto and put them at one of the leaders going into the playoffs. But this would have been a one-year stopgap. And what I was concerned about, not only the chemistry, Rich, what you would have to give up. Look what Toronto gave up. I mean, they're betting on him staying. If he does not stay, that means that Toronto is now in full rebuild mode.
Yeah.
And to some people that's a good thing but other people, Toronto has had the best record the last couple of years in the conference.
Which is crazy to think too, because people think if the Sixers didn't make certain moves, they would peak just like Toronto at 59 wins. So it's
exactly.
That's
not happening.
No. But again, you still listen. Go back to the conversation, and I know people get up in arms. Well, what Brown said, star hunting, star developing. Oh, well, you only like to focus on the second part. Well, because that's the juicy part. That's the meat and potatoes, so we're going to focus on that. I'm sorry, on the first part, not the second part. The bottom line is they lost a player who's going to go back to Europe. They still don't have a GM in place. They swung and missed. They were never getting LeBron. They didn't get Paul George, and they didn't get Leonard. So it's
Agreed.
like, I mean, come on, you can't push a certain narrative here. It has not been the greatest offseason in an offseason that was vital for this franchise going forward.
100%. And I think that they, me, I think, I told you this before, I think the guy who is really, I think, is going to come out and be that guy that gets him over the top is their number one pick from last year. I think Falk is a guy that people are still not sure of, and I think the Sixers are playing him down. But when I watched him play, yes, his shot was, left him. But he still can take anybody off the dribble. He can get his shot off, and you saw what he was doing when he was in there. He was going for the mid-range. He wasn't shooting the three, but he was getting to the rack. He was making assists. He's playing great defense. He really does open up the offense for you because people really can't play him because they can't guard him. He's so quick off the dribble. There's a reason he was the number one pick in the draft.
Right,
so if you take out his three-point shot left him. Okay. Well, we can work on that. But the other parts of his game did not leave him, and they're still there, and I think that'll be a big help for the Sixers going forward.
Well, and another thing is in closing, too, they also have to implement a GM. They have to get in it.
Yeah, that's very true. What are you doing in your off time? You want
No. You listen, I got a hard time trying to get a player on with that PR staff. You think they're going to actually interview me? I'd be too critical. I would be clearing house with those guys over there, starting with a lot of the guys that handle that kind of stuff. No. I'm good. I'm keeping busy. You want to give me the Knicks GM job? I'll take over the Knicks.
All right. Well, they have been below 500 for the last 6
They're
years,
horrible.
So
I'll clean house there, too.
They're going going up. But if you think about it, the Sixers, you're a good point. They still have a lot of money. They still can, potentially make a splash if whoever's the free agent. I mean, some of the guys now are tied up, and I know Kawhi was the number one name out there.
Right.
But he was only a one-year stopgap, and Toronto for what Toronto had to give up, if the Sixers had to give up, I give Brown credit because you had this candy dangling, and boy, was that going to be sweet.
Yeah.
Man, would that have been nice going down. There's no doubt about that. But when he left to L.A. next year, which he's 90% probably would have, it would have been a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, listen, pal, I know you're on vacay. I appreciate you checking in. Always a pleasure. We'll talk next week. Look forward to having you in studio as well. Good stuff as always, bud.
All right, buddy, you got it. Take care. Thanks.
You got it. Billy Osborne joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.